So we have a number of board members who are participating remotely. If you could turn your camera on, that will help us on this end. So if you could turn your video on if you are a member of the committee. And then Martha is going to try to monitor if committee members have any comments as we're going through the agenda. Send her something in chat and we'll try to make sure that as best we can to recognize you so you can participate. And then we'll do the same, send something in chat as well, or raise your hand if you're a community member when we get to public comment. Okay, I think that's kind of the housekeeping.
I think probably the easiest thing is raise, use the icon to raise our hands.
Yep, either raise your hand or send something in chat. I guess if you raise your hand, she can, that's probably easier, Martha, for you to see. Yeah, let's do that, raise hand. Dave, did you have something?
Well, you all just got a note from Carol McBride about, she says, just checking if we have a backup location that can be used or if we should all be attending over Zoom due to the accident at Route 7.
She's in her car.
She was told that Moncton Road would be closed for a while.
Maybe Keith, do you know other way around?
If she is coming, are we coming from Addison, Carol?
Yeah, I'm sitting in my car. So it's closed at the intersection of Route 7, and the fire department's blocked it off up by the old gas station, the Variety. So you can't get onto Moncton Road at all.
Okay.
There's no way.
So I'll just sit in my car.
All right, well, it's great, Martha, that you figured out how to participate remotely. We'll get started, and then if people arrive who weren't able to participate remotely, we can just check in to see if there's anything we need to go back to revisit. So the first item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next item is to approve the minutes of October 4, 2021. Have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Keith.
Second.
Second. By Ed. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Tracy's going to give us an update on things that have been happening in the area and in our timeline.
Yes, 3 quick updates. One, I keep my eye on Ripton, as I'm sure many of you do as well. Based on communications from Ripton to the Vermont State Board of Education on October 20th, it sounds like that process of exploring rejoining Addison Central is at a standstill. Ripton appears to be seeking assurance that it has, to quote from their letter, power, and presumably that is over school closure and also with regard to board representation. And although Addison Central has been cordial, their meeting minutes reflect board discussion that suggests that they're not comfortable giving those assurances, presumably when considering the best interests of all of the students in the region on a pre-K-12 basis, but also they are discussing some legal questions with regard to board representation and school closure. So that was at their September 27th meeting. So we'll just keep watching and see what we can learn and what gets clarified in that process. I also promised to keep you updated on the pupil weighting study. The proposal regarding English language learner funding that Senator Hardy discussed when she was with us has been released and appears to be neutral to positive for Addison Northwest and Mount Abraham. There was a public hearing on the 29th of October. They have a meeting coming up on November 3rd, where it's likely, the agenda suggests they'll be reviewing models and getting information on transition considerations. There also is an agenda item related to income-based property tax models that connects with another legislative committee. And then beyond that, there are 2 other meetings on November 19th and December 10th. So if we remain patient, that likely will become clear before the new year. Also, I made 2 tiny adjustments to the work plan. I'll include that every time until it doesn't need, there's no need for changes on a regular basis. And the changes are simple. We just moved the transportation study to this evening and also moved the considerations for a union school structure to tonight. And there have been no other changes.
Tracy, you might add to your updates that okay, I forgot. If it's important, it'll come back.
I know a couple people just arrived. There's been an accident that delayed people. So far, we just adopted the agenda, approved the minutes, and given brief updates on pupil weighting study and those changes to the timeline. Does anybody who just arrived have any comments or questions, concerns?
I recall, but and that is that the House Education Committee heard from several school people don't do anything. So how that impacts weighting study and all the stuff coming out of the task force will be interesting to see how that plays out.
It seemed like there were more people that wanted them to adopt the study as shown than there were people that didn't want us to do anything, though, from what I heard.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on updates? Okay, we'll move on to the transportation study. We need Tim Amon.
It's not on yet.
He's not on yet. All right, so we'll take that out of order. Tracy, are you prepared to do the financial considerations for union school option?
Of course.
Let me know.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, just to bring you back into the mindset of the different governance options before we talk a little bit about the considerations. If you could see in your mind the status quo, and the visual for that is the 2 circles side by side. The Union School District, or the Union District, I'm not going to say school district, I'm going to say Union District and Union School to make it less confusing. So the Union District model is the single circle, right? 2 circles become 1. And the Union School model is 2 or more overlapping circles inside a larger circle. So multiple districts in a supervisory union structure with whatever grade level configurations are agreed upon for each of the member districts. So hold those in your head. One of the questions that was asked early on, I think Dave asked, is the process of forming a union school, so a district that just serves some grades, that is collaborative between regions, the same as the process for a unified union district? And the answer to that is yes. So it's the same study process we're undertaking now, where there is some study of the pros and cons, articles are drafted, it's sent to the state board for approval, and then to voters for approval, okay? And that part's the easy part. Because many of the costs and implications of forming a union school are the same as forming a union district, those opportunities are there in both structures. As I was developing this one pager, I wanted to emphasize that those are present in both models. So it's not significantly productive for this kind of thinking for me to spell out all of those possibilities and costs and know that they're the same in either model. So it's not a variable that influences differences between those two options. The key difference is the unique considerations for forming a union school district. And it's the steps that happen after voters approve a union school formation. And that is that the supervisory union services in that kind of model will no longer be a part of the individual school districts. They would need to be kind of pulled out of the current operational structures, and a supervisory union would need to either be identified or formed again to provide those services. So
this is with the straight school districts that we have now. To merge them together, we'd have an extra step, or is this with the other one we'd have?
This is the other one.
Okay.
So if, say, you decided you wanted to have a union middle high school district and 2 elementary districts, an Addison Northwest Elementary District that serves the elementary schools there now, and a Mount Abe Elementary School District that serves those schools now, those 2 districts would vote to form the Union Middle High School District after going through the study process and getting state board approval. And then the state board would assign the supervisory union, okay? And so,
Is there a chicken egg
that's
scenario there?
exactly the phrase I have in my notes to explain.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Okay.
so perfect. And there is less local control, to be honest. There's local influence, but less local control that would allow us to plan concretely about what to expect in terms of how to budget for and account for and plan for both transition costs and the ongoing operational costs of a new supervisory union structure. We know the State Board of Ed would consider the preferences of the impacted differences, but they are purely the responsibility of the state board. And right now, as you mentioned, it is exactly a chicken and egg situation that you need to know the supervisory union structure in order to plan for a move to a union school, but you don't get to know the supervisory union structure until you get approval from voters for movement to a supervisory union structure. So, and to even get to thinking about the modeling for that, there are some key decisions that would need to be made, like what grades will be served for whatever union school you would recommend, the school location or locations, board representation and size for each district, the number of elementary districts, and again, that uncertain supervisory union district and structure. I can't model that for you, can't model board representation for you, unless I know how many elementary districts we have. And we need to know what the supervisory union assignment is before we can model a supervisory union board structure again. Yes, sir?
With breaking out a supervisory union structure like this, is there the responsibilities that go to that central office, if you will? Are they functions that go there for economy and scale, if you will? Or are there certain things by statute that have to go into that central office?
There are things by statute that have to go into that central office. Can't tell you the number in statute right now. Patrick and I were dueling statutory references last time we spoke.
Tracy won.
There is a section in statute that clearly defines what services need to be at the supervisory union. It includes things like transportation, special ed, data management services, curriculum, and financial operations, construction management. We can get that for you, but we know if you think back to your structures prior to your current merged districts of Addison Northwest School District and Mount Abraham School District, those services that had been pulled out would again need to be pulled out. Doesn't preclude additional ones from being centralized, but
So
there's a
given-
statutory list of those.
Given what we have today, at least in the Mount Abe central office, which I won't pretend I know a whole lot about, but anyway, are there, I guess the question is, are there things, I mean, the things you said, like transportation, IT, facilities, all those kind of things, it seems like what our central office is doing today and not a whole lot more.
It's true.
So it's kind of like pulling all those things in our central office remotely, and it would combine with the Regen's one, I guess, or something like that, or?
It's, and that's what the next section is about. There would be transition costs and there would be ongoing costs. And really what you're doing is taking two fiscal entities and making it into anywhere from three fiscal entities or more. And the services, the personnel, the financial allocations, the oversight and the administration, it would be like starting 3 or more new businesses and redeploying all of your operational services that way. And the most important reallocation relates to personnel and making sure all of your personnel get assigned properly to a new entity. They get paid on the first day. They get assigned to the proper health care, and because it's a new employer, get that new health care plan set up and have their card on the first day of operation, and all of the details of taking care of your employees, reassigning them to new businesses that you've had to build from scratch. Not that your team isn't skilled and familiar with how to do that, but doing that 3 or 4 times and distributing employees is a challenging transition cost that you don't want to make a mistake on. There were a couple of, do you remember it? Okay, let me finish my transition cost. You'd have to develop multiple sets of policies, and there would be some significant legal support for transition, from transfer of property, new contracts and negotiations, new contracts with all of your vendors, because again, your new fiscal entities, setting up the new federal accounts, data systems and reporting. And then there also would be the multiplicative ongoing cost implications for maintaining multiple systems that you're familiar with.
Though, no doubt, somewhat more complicated, all of those things are the same or similar to forming a unified union. You're creating a new business, you have to transfer employees, a transportation plan is designed by the central office, the special ed would all go to one central office. So it's not all that different from forming a unified union.
The task list is the same. The opportunity for error and the complexity is different. It's a lot easier to move all employees into one new employer. You know you're not going to make a mistake. And it streamlines your work with the health insurance vendor, for example, as opposed to moving all employees from two employers to.
Centralization is always easier.
Right.
So are dictators easier than
That's true
democracy.
too.
Doesn't mean they're necessarily better.
So in that instance, if I'm a teacher in elementary district Mountain, I'm just calling it Mountain Lake. Okay. If I'm a teacher in elementary district Mountain, do I work for that district or am I an employee of this larger supervisory union?
Are you a special educator or a classroom teacher?
You just answered my question. So if I get rift or things change, I don't get transferred to the lake place where they might need help. So your staffing becomes very constrained in that situation.
It's what we used to have.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I understood that properly, because special educators are employees of the supervisory union, which is true in the district I work in.
Right.
But so are teachers, because we're now all one supervisory union. But if we split into 3 entities, you will have 3 different employers for your teachers.
Exactly.
Instead of 2.
Instead of 1.
No, right now we have Addison Northwest.
Oh, instead of 2, but we could have 1.
So want to open it up to all kinds of questions if you have them, and acknowledge that, you know, as you go through this process as a committee, you might find that the status quo is not the best option going forward based on what you said. And you might even find that a union district, the one circle option, is better, but not likely to succeed. And in that case, you might want to study a union school more deeply, understanding that that could be a pathway, maybe, to achieve goals for students at a cost comparable to current operations without those savings. It will not be as cost effective, but it might be a step in the journey if the larger steps you want to take don't materialize. So it's not something that's precluded from study. In order to move you forward, I'm hoping that you will choose a path by December and move into the process of designing what you think is the best alternative to the status quo, and then comparing your projections for the status quo in the future with your projections for the best alternative you can design, and then filtering those through those values and priorities that you developed during your circle discussions and will continue to refine with input from the community. And I do want to remind you that we'll be looking at learning opportunities and educational possibilities for students, as well as that community feedback in December. So I think you'll be in a good place by then to pick your best option, understanding that no door is ever closed.
So questions regarding that? Ed?
How many superintendents in this model?
It would depend on how the state board allocates districts, as well as what you decide in terms of the number of districts that you want to operate.
If the model that's presented is 3, is there 3 superintendents working together?
No, that would still potentially be 1 superintendent if all districts were assigned.
But a district in that case, that's all the elementary schools, say, Lake District.
That's one option,
Is an amalgamation of, like, schools used to be a district.
right?
Now you push together a bunch of schools and they're one district, but with no leader. The leadership is in another element entirely.
That's correct.
Who owns the property?
The district still would.
So the districts would retain ownership of the property. How do they manage that? How would they manage it?
It goes back to what you experienced before your merger. And again, it's dependent on the decisions that you make. Are you gonna have 2 elementary districts? Are you gonna have 1 elementary district? Are you gonna go back and have each town have its own district? That's really bringing you back.
Okay, so that chair of that board of that district owns the land, owns the schools. That board would own the schools in that district. And one last one. Transportation goes to the supervisory union. That implies there'd be one transportation system serving 10 towns.
There would be one entity responsible for ensuring transportation for 10 towns, right? It could be multiple providers, it could be owned buses, it could be one. But there's one entity responsible for that, and that's the supervisory union. Kevin?
Just to comment, I've never seen a dotted line organization work well. And I would really caution us that we really think long and hard if we start moving towards something like this, because this is essentially a dotted line organization.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I would caution us be very cautious about moving in this direction, as it is a dotted line organization and they're just fraught with all sorts of different agendas, and nobody's reporting to nobody necessarily. That makes the decisions, they're just a nightmare.
Which I suppose would be the argument for an Act 46 district, moving in Mount Abe's case from 5 elementary schools and a supervisory union and a high school into a single district. And it was a lot of the logic behind creating Act 46. My thoughts are more political. And I expressed this in a note to Tracy. My view is that unless there's ironclad ability for towns to leave this newly formed unified union, and that they would have to have a positive vote in order to close a school in their town, I don't see that passing in the Mount Abe district. Because of that, I think the supervisory union model is doable, can pass. The current Mount Abe board would be responsible for the elementary schools in the current Mount Abe district. They would have to solve their elementary school closure, consolidation, staffing issues on their own, so to speak, which they have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to work through how that's going to happen in our district. It seems to me from afar, the Virgins district has that much more sorted out than the Mount Abe district does. Maybe that's not true. So I'm just thinking of voting at the polls. If we want to create something that's going to pass, I think the dotted line supervisory union, as you refer to it, will provide, as you said earlier, Tracy, will provide many of the economic opportunities and educational opportunities at the middle and high school level. Let's move in that direction. Let's take advantage of what's doable. Get that done. Let Mount Abe for sure, and maybe Virgin sort out their elementary school issues on their own. And maybe we're back in 2 years having a discussion about a unified district because we've taken one step and now we can take another step. And maybe 10 years from now, we'll talk about one high school for the county.
I understand what you're thinking, Dave. There was a poll that the Community Engagement Committee did in spring, maybe, I don't know, it was recently. And that poll, including the 2 towns that are having problems with their schools being closed, one leaving, or have voted left the district, there was like a 55 or 56% approval rating, if you will, in a poll. Not everybody's polling, I understand that, to merge districts. So I think, except for Lincoln and Starksboro, I think you'll find it is generally is favorably, maybe more favorably viewed upon than we think. So I wouldn't want to necessarily dismiss that we're going after what we could consider the most optimal. The other thing is, as you really need to be mindful of the impact of having 2 different school districts preparing elementary school children for a middle and high school. The big advantage of consolidating the 5 towns in Mount Abe underneath one supervisory unit was to get the curriculum established and equalized so that you can work across the district to do the best you can to have students equal by the time they come together in a junior high and high school situation. And if we go back to this supervisory union model, we're going away from that. And I don't think, and you know, I was on the VSBA board for a short period of time, but the backhaul conversations in supervisory unions are, school boards are telling the central office, we're not going to do it that way, or something like that. There's a certain amount of risk and resistance to the umbrella of curriculum or COVID or whatever the case may be that's directed out of the central office. And that discord is what is referred to with the dotted line matrix, is going to be there, and it's just going to lead to a risk of non-success for students if they aren't coordinated, if you will, for the eventuality of going to a single high school.
Sarah, do you have something?
I did. I actually think, while I get it's complicated and that people might be afraid of some things, there's something to be said for a fresh start and doing it in a way that might make sense for now that people have a lot more, say, background knowledge in the communities about what we're looking for and what we're trying to do. And I think in some ways that could be really beneficial. And I'd like to keep the elementary school or town thing a little bit. I don't know that they have to go together. I think people have different potential opinions about a merged district versus a town school. And I also think there's people that are like invested in some of these decisions as time goes on. I don't want to say they're aging out of the decision, but there's a different perspective on the decision as time goes on, depending on when you first started thinking about it and where your own role is. I just throw that out there.
Thanks, Sarah. Erica, go ahead.
Thank you. I just was, first of all, I really agree with, I think it was Kevin talking about the benefits of the curriculum being, organized. If you're going to have students all end up in the same program, they should have a consistent curriculum through the elementary schools, and also not just curriculum, but also the other opportunities that it's, I think it was Troy was saying that it's, a benefit to be able to have staff be placed where they're needed. But also there are programs that might be available to more students if the district is bigger and more unified. And also, I just really feel like if the model that has, more local control for separate elementary schools also means that we have to set up 3 different organizations, and the transition costs are going to be 3 times as much. And we are taking over a year to put our plan together. I don't want this to be a transitional plan that we're expecting to come back to in 2 years or 3 years from now. This is a lot of work and commitment of resources, and it should be a plan that we feel like is good enough to go forward at least, maybe 5 or 10 years into the future. So I find it a little demoralizing to think that, well, we should just come up with something good enough to tide us over. I think that we can do better. I think that if we come up with a good plan, there will be reasons that it's good. And if it's not good, then we won't recommend it. But I think, I don't know, I've stalled out, so I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Anybody else? So I think obviously this is a really important conversation for us. We're going to be getting feedback from the community, feedback from teachers. As we get that feedback and we continue to think about this, we should revisit it, maybe make a pro and con list on these. But let's keep this is an important issue for us to keep thinking about, and at some, hopefully in December, reaching a decision. Go ahead, Troy.
And if I remember correctly, is it true that nobody with this many towns has done this? Like, are we the only ones? If we were to merge into one unified supervisory or unified district, the other places that have done it would be like Burlington is just one district because of their population. CVU is only 5 towns, but because of their population, they're big. Like, nobody has taken 15 towns or however many. Is that true? Like, is North Country, how many towns are in the North Country?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but, yeah, I'd have to look.
I think it's possible that Londonderry and its surrounding communities, 10 of them, all choice towns, did come together. So their central board is just for elementary schools, and I'm not sure how they treat 7th and 8th graders, but
Tuition out the kids to
Pardon?
they tuition out the kids to assorted high schools then, right?
tuition all the high school kids. I'm not sure 7th and 8th graders whether they tuition those out too, but yeah.
So there's not really many models to look at, as I guess was point I'm trying to make, as to varying degrees of success or to look at and get feedback.
Not in Vermont.
I feel really strange in this conversation because I went to over 50 town meetings and school board members and made exactly those arguments that you just made, Kevin, for voting to go together as an Act 46 district. And I recognize the comments made about the curriculum, unification of the curriculum making a whole lot of sense for our kids. And of course, the superintendent's office loves it because that centralization of services and control makes it a whole lot easier to run the central office. I just, political antenna just has concerns.
I get it. I think, unfortunately, I'm beginning to believe what I'm seeing is brick and mortar is the most important thing, taxes are second, and programs third.
I would,
For a lot of people.
as a retired superintendent, I would say that no central office administrator that I know of would choose work that's easier for them at the expense of opportunities for kids. And the reason that education leaders are excited about it is it provides us opportunities to improve opportunities and outcomes for students. And whether it's harder work or more complex work or more streamlined work, my interactions with education leaders really suggest that doing well for students and in order to do that, doing well for our employees is at the foundation of what we would hope to accomplish in changes of this nature. Mary?
I was gonna respond by saying that since Act 46 and the consistency of the curriculum, I have noticed personally, maybe not huge changes in data, but I'm definitely seeing that there is more consistency coming to the high school. And, you know, we're just at the beginning of that. So it's exciting to think of what could happen if we can continue on with that. And then additionally, I just wanted to point out, as a Lincoln resident, I think that we as a group should consider how we can communicate to all residents about some of the pros and cons of becoming supervisory unions. I think that we learned a lot as a group, and I think that many citizens are not as informed as they could be to make a more informed decision. Knowing that a vote could happen in the future and will happen in the future, I think we have a responsibility to clarify some of that information.
Anyone else? Brad, go ahead. Can't hear you.
You're muted.
I always forget the mute button. Sorry about that. I have a comment, I guess, and a question. I'll start with the question. Erica raised an interesting point in my mind, and I was just wondering, as someone who's relatively new in the scene of all this, when Act 46 was sort of considered, was there any anticipated shelf life of Act 46? I mean, because it's been 3 or 4 years, and now we're talking about further consolidation. Was the step that we're looking at right now being considered by the Act 46 folks, that it would be in place for a few years and then we just have to consolidate further? That's my question. I just don't know the answer to that.
And Dave Sharp came to the Moncton School Board meeting. He suggested that we combine Mount and Virgins at that time.
I may have.
Yeah. So yeah, it was.
No, but to Brad's question, no, Act 46 is history. It's complete. That doesn't mean that more mergers can or can happen, or that some mergers can be undone, or,
And there's
the
no more
statutes are all still
incentives.
there.
The
Pardon?
incentives are gone, Act 46.
The incentives are
all
gone.
too. Brad, you had a second part to that.
Just the comment, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this, sort of personally, but, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it seems almost like there's a perception that getting bigger and more centralized sort of automatically means better programs for kids and that costs will be less. And I'm just still, you know, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out if that's really true or not. And so that's just my comment.
So, yep, that's a good piece to consider as we make that decision. Thanks, Brad. We're going to move on. Is Tim? Yeah, Tim. Okay, Tim, if you could go and present the transportation study, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate the time this evening. My name is Tim Ammon. I am a co-owner here of Decision Support Group. We are the folks who have been conducting the assessment of what some of the transportation impacts may be at the secondary school level in the event that we had emerged, or I want to just try to be careful with the terminology that I'm using, having heard the last 30 or 40 minutes of discussion, to make sure that I don't say something out of turn. But so I'll simplify it in terms of suggesting there are kids going in opposite directions, right? So in this, what I'd like to share with you tonight is the results of the analytical work that we have completed to date, and then take any questions at the end to address those issues. So what you should be able to see here momentarily is the summary presentation. I will take you through this regional assessment of transportation services. I think one of the things that we always like to start with is what was essentially the problem that we were trying to address and how did we go about doing it. Our first critical question was, what would the design of a regionalized transportation system look like? And how could we do it to support minimized ride times, as minimized impacts on cost, and promoting operational efficiency where possible? In order to do that, what we looked at was two primary options. The first option essentially being a dedicated middle school and high school system for transportation, servicing all students from both districts and bringing them to their destination schools, whether it would be the middle school in Virgins or the high school in Mount A. The second option that we looked at was essentially maintaining the structure of the current in-district systems and then using a shuttle system to transfer between the two districts to get students to the destination middle school or high school. The way that we looked at this problem and tried to assess the viability of the options, there were four primary things that we looked at. First was in and around the time requirements for school. Could we do this in a way that maintained a viable set of school times? The second piece was, could we do this with as limited as possible impact on student ride times, recognizing that part of the process for transportation is getting students to school ready to learn. The third impact is some of the things that we've been speaking about here so far this evening, which is on the cost side of things. And then finally, and this is something that we have been increasingly emphasizing over the last 10 months, but in particular over the last 4 months, as it has emerged as a particularly challenging element in providing transportation services across the country and in Vermont. And that is just the regular availability of resources, and resources being both buses and personnel in particular, but the challenge of vehicles being available is something that is going to emerge, I think, as we continue to move forward over the next 2 to 2.5 years. So when we look at the baseline structure, what were we looking at? In essence, we are looking at approximately 1,200 students across the two systems, and we'll see some visuals on this. We had approximately 435, so call it 450 rounding up, bus stops that have been created across the two systems now. Our process was to ensure that we were using existing bus stops, because one of the determinations that I did not want to make is how to determine safety. Ultimately, what our decision-making process is that if you have determined that a stop is safe, with all of the local knowledge and expertise that exists, then I think we can make that same determination. When we look at the count of existing resources that were being used, we had 29 total resources broken down 19 and 10, as you can see on the screen. And then obviously in consideration of things like ride times and so forth, we wanted to look at what is the furthest distance that we had to transport students as or in. And what we see is that it's the furthest point from which students are going to their school is about 20 miles, not exactly 20 miles, but in that neighborhood. And why that's important is because if we think about just traveling 20 miles in a car and how long that takes and not stopping to pick up any other students or doing any other kind of a mission, that consumes a fair bit of time. So we have to consider that in the design and development of the routing structure. When we look at the distribution of students, you'll see on the map here where the clustering exists. Those are the big blue dots. You'll see some singular and some smaller clusters of blue dots. This is again, students distributed across the districts. The A's and the M's that you see are just the origination districts. So either Addison Northwest or Mount Abe. So it doesn't actually mean anything other than just helping me understand where students were coming from. So what we can see, obviously, just by virtue of just taking a scan of this, we've got a fairly dispersed pattern of students with some centroids where we've got some decent clustering, but we're going to have some challenges, particularly in the upper right and in the bottom left, trying to get students to their destination schools within a reasonable ride time. So that obviously becomes one of the challenges of the of routing for middle school students. We see a similar pattern, although slightly different at the high school. We see a couple of larger, and I think that's primarily a function of having the additional grade, right? We've got 4 grades instead of 3. So what we have here is some additional centroids where there are larger density, but the dispersion pattern is fairly similar, and upper right and bottom left continue to become a challenge from the perspective of ride time and thinking about student experience from a transportation standpoint. When we think about stop locations, these are existing stop locations across the systems. And so there's a lot of them. Right. And that's not surprising given the characteristics of the road network and given the characteristics of just the way services are provided. And so one of the challenges with a lot of stops is that every time, and I think if you've ever been behind one of them on the way to work, one of the challenges of a lot of stops is that it takes a lot of time. And because every time the bus is pulling up to a stop, it has to slow down, it turns on the lights, it stops to pick up the student, it stops to check the surrounding area, it turns the lights back off, and then it picks up and proceeds to the next one. Right? So each one of those stops takes a particular amount of time, which we factor into the routing equation in order to determine how many students we think we can pick up on any given route in order to be able to try to stay within some reasonable ride time. Okay, so this dispersion of stops obviously is just one of the things that becomes an underlying characteristic of the way we're trying to manage the routing network. So if we think about this from a planning standpoint, just to give everybody a sense of what some of the initial planning parameters were, one of the things that we have to make the assumption about, because we don't know and we don't have mechanisms in place to identify specifically who's a rider and who isn't a rider, and when they're a rider and when they might not be a rider. And in addition to that, we have some considerations around the road network and hazards and thinking about that. From our baseline planning perspective, we've assumed 2 things that are fairly important to keep in mind. We've assumed that for purposes of transportation, all students would be eligible for services. Again, thinking about this from a secondary perspective. All students would be eligible for services. And we've created we've created a baseline walking distance of 3,500 feet, right, which is about 3/4 of a mile. But if you just think about the math of 1,200 students and 435 stops, there isn't anybody walking 3/4 of a mile to a bus stop, right? We've got plenty of places to pick people up. So that's that challenge was mostly just for purposes of ensuring that I could understand how far apart certain things could be before the system would kind of fall apart and be unacceptable. So again, from our purposes, one of the things that we did is to just use the existing stop array and assign students to the closest stop that would get them to their destination school. We, obviously have the grade distribution of 6 to 8 in Virgins and 9 through 12 in Mount 8. So we used existing times in thinking about 8 and 3, and actually what we have is really it's 8:20 to 2:50, not 3:30. That's a mistake on my part. One of the things that we want to be able to think about, and the reason that we're thinking about where these times are, is obviously we've got a system that what we're trying to do from an efficiency perspective is do two things that at times are working against each other. The first thing is we are trying to get a reasonable load of kids on every particular bus so that we can do some component of maximizing the available seating capacity, while at the same time, we're trying to reuse that bus as many times as possible, because that again allows us to spread the cost out over as many trips as we can, right? And the challenge that we have in trying to do that second thing in particular is when we're going to the upper right or we're going to the lower left, that's taking a lot of time. We're not really going to get a lot of additional work out of that asset. So in those instances, we have to make sure that we're doing a really good job of using the available capacity. Right. And when we're thinking about that, we also have to think about it across the spectrum of students that we have. So from K to 12, and as all of you are acutely aware, kindergarten kids are smaller than high school kids. So we can't make the same assumption that we can fit all the same number on the seats at the same time. So we have to start thinking about how do we effectively utilize the capacity to represent this fully mixed grade alignment of students. In particular, when we're thinking about middle and high school students, how do we account for just the fact that those kids are just bigger? And here's a little bit of school bus trivia for you. School bus seats are 39 inches wide on the assumption that every kid has a 13-inch butt, and that is probably not true. So we make allowances across those 39 inches to try to fit multiple kids on a seat where we can, and then in that allows us to effectively utilize the capacity. Okay, so those are all just some of the baseline planning parameters that go into this. In addition, one of the things that we are cognizant of is supervisory time at the schools. So in the route design process that we use, we try to think about what we refer to as what's the arrival window. So what's the earliest that a bus can get to a school, and what's the latest that it can get to a school in the morning before the kids are going to be late for class or late for whatever their morning activities are. And secondarily, in the afternoon when they're departing, it's essentially the same process in reverse. What's the earliest time that a vehicle can leave a school, and what's the latest time that a vehicle can leave a school? And the window that we've created for ourselves is 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. So for example, from an 8 to 3 bell schedule, we would have buses arriving at 7:50 all the way up to 7:55 about, allowing 5 minutes for kids to get off the bus, get into class. And then on the departure side of things, recognizing that the bell would ring at 3 o'clock, we have buses starting to load approximately 3:10, and then departing for their routes in the afternoon. Right, so just to keep in mind, that's how the arrival and departure window works. Again, when we think about a routing question in this in figuring out how to balance efficiency and effectiveness, we think in terms of how many students can we assign to this asset. Our target maximum number of students was 60. So if you think about a school bus, a typical school bus that everybody thinks of with the pointy nose and the flat back and all that, has 72 seats available to it based on this 13-inch standard. We, as a maximum, are actually loading it only to 60, recognizing that we have some butts that are more than 13 inches wide. So in addition to that, What we are also thinking about is from a service perspective, what's a target maximum ride time? Our target maximum was ideally an hour, but as it says on the slide, that's just utterly impractical in some portions of the district to make ride times an hour, particularly as we will see in the dedicated system, which is the first option that I suggested. So when we think about ride times, that's going to be one of the things that we really need to think about how to manage under any kind of a either consolidated or shared system as it's being established. In addition, as you were looking at the map, we had some kids who were spread out fairly far outside of the initial district boundaries. For my purposes from routing, those students are not included in the routing analysis, primarily because it's my understanding that they are getting to school some other way other than the bus. So they're again, just from the standpoint of how we bracket the problem, those students are not included in the routing analysis. Okay, so when we look at it, this is what we refer to as the spaghetti diagram, right? It looks like a bowl of spaghetti. It's all of the routes and stops coming into their destination school, which here is the high school in Mount Abe. So you can see essentially the way that we're thinking about the problem here is we are using the individual buses to try to clear areas in particular. So the collection of stops that are being designed to clear an area, and then thinking about where, so for example, if what we have is, I'm going to try to do this whole like pencil thing, and I'm not 1000% certain I'm going to be awesome at it. So like, give me a little bit of leave. But if what we're thinking about is we've got a route that may end up here somewhere in the Virgins area, and we've got 20 minutes to get to school. It takes us 20 minutes to get to Mount Abe. So at that point, we can't pick up any more kids, right? Because we've got to drive that tail end of the route to be able to get to school on time. So as we're thinking about what is essentially sort of the left side of the diagram here, time becomes a significant consideration. When we're thinking about the right side of the diagram here, the primary thing that we're thinking about is seating capacity, right? Which is just non-Catholic school penmanship here. So again, what this represents and what I think is important to consider as you're doing your assessments of this is that we do have different challenges based on the alignment of things in terms of how we're going to deal with it from a transportation perspective. And we have a similar kind of consideration when we're thinking about the middle schools. This is the spaghetti diagram in the middle school. Essentially what we have is we have the same problem in reverse, right? So we've got kids who are up in this corner up here who have to come down and through Virgins, or kids who are down, in the Lincoln area potentially that have to get brought across boundary. And so we're very conscious in those instances of the ride times that would be required. And I think when we're thinking about this as a model, it is important to recognize that, and somehow I'll figure out how to get rid of that thing. What becomes important to recognize is that we have a set of constraints in doing that kind of analysis that are not necessarily helpful to the model that we're trying to create, right? At a minimum, what we see is 39 buses being required to do this. Which if you'll remember, and we'll see this a little bit later on, that's actually 10 more than we're using right now. And even with that, what we see is some ride characteristics that are not necessarily favorable from either an efficiency or a service perspective. We see a fairly long set of ride times. Again, on average, ride times of 53 minutes means that obviously somebody is above the average. So there's a fair number of students who have ride times above an hour. And in this instance of the 39 routes, approximately 15 of them would require ride times of above an hour. So we would have a lot of work to do and frankly would need some additional assets beyond the minimum to try to drive those ride times down in order to be able to accommodate that 1 hour desired ride length. And so when we think about it, the way we would see this practically wind up, in my opinion, is we would probably need more along the lines of 43 to 45 buses, which is a significant increase over the number that we have right now. We would be able to keep the school times relatively similar to what we have now, but because of the ride times, we would likely have some very early to early pickups that would probably be unacceptable from a service perspective, particularly in an environment like after starting on Monday where we're setting the clocks back, right? So I think it would be that kind of a consideration that we would need to start making. We would still have, even at 45 buses, we would still have a limited population of students that have over an hour ride time. And if we're thinking about it from a cost perspective, we have contract costs that are approximately $55,000 a year. And if we assume that baseline of 29 buses, we would have somewhere between $750,880,000 in additional costs to be able to design this dedicated network. So one of the things that we want to be cognizant of is that while this is an option, it's probably, and this is similar to actually some of the things I was hearing as we were listening to the previous discussion, this is an option. It's not necessarily a great option to think about, but it is an option to be able to do it, it's part of the discussion about transportation not necessarily being an impediment to doing this, but just being a reasonably significant challenge in this instance to implementing this kind of a structure. And in particular, and I will revisit this theme probably as we go forward again, finding something like 15 or 17 additional bus drivers is at least one of the big challenges that we would have to accomplish here. Right. I mean, I think as most of you either know or have heard or have experienced, these folks are they're not materializing anywhere across the country, including Vermont, and consequently, transportation services are really suffering at the moment, and it's unlikely, in my opinion, to get substantially better in the near term, and the near term being sort of the next couple of years. So what we wanted to try to think about was, under the shuttle structure, how could we create a system that minimized the need for additional assets while still giving us the capability to support some sort of regionalized model. So from a shuttle perspective, the way that this system would operate is we would essentially maintain our in-district systems. So you'd have kids riding on a fairly similar set of routes to the ones that they're riding on now. And then they would be collected at a common collection point and shuttled to the other district. So we would have the middle school students going over from Mount Abe to Virgins, and then we would have the Virgins high school students coming from Virgins to back over to Mount Abe. And this is just sort of odd in terms of how balanced it was, but we had approximately 320 kids going in either direction. That's just chance, I think. That wasn't by any plan, but it does demonstrate that we've got a fairly similar set of constraints going in either direction to be able to do this, right? And so what we know is that, it's approximately 20 minutes from a ride time perspective, thinking about how fast the school bus can travel to be able to make that trip. So one of the things that we would need to be conscious of in the design of the system is we would need a period of time where students are arriving at the transfer point. So that is either their school in their respective districts. So, that loading process is generally between 5 and 10 minutes, and then 20 minutes to make the trip, and then again 4 or 5 minutes to unload the bus and get into the school that they're in. So from a ride time perspective and from a service perspective, we're thinking about that as we're building out the shuttling option service model. So again, I think what we have estimated is that depending on how many students you wanted riding on the shuttle, we would need somewhere between 7 and 10 buses to do those shuttles. So that's, somewhere between, call it 3 or 4 going in either direction to be able to support that. And we have two ways to think about this. We have a way to think about it where the shuttle buses are being used exclusively for the purposes of operating the shuttles, or the shuttle buses being used and then integrated into the routing network as it exists in either the origin town or the destination towns, depending on the time of day, right? So, and we'll see an example of that here in a minute. But if we don't make any changes to accommodate the shuttle buses being used as part of the system overall, the cost impact of this is in the neighborhood of $380,000 to $550,000 without any bell time changes. If we do make the changes, we think that there are going to be 2 or 3 new assets that are required rather than 7 to 10. So that cost impact comes down to something like $110,000 to $165,000 for those assets in particular. And then just as we're thinking about it, and this is one of the particular challenges of building shuttle systems, when we have nested bell schedules, and what I mean by that is we have one group of schools whose length of day is shorter than another group of schools. So no matter where you slide it around in that day, it's still trapped underneath the longer length of day. We just have to be really conscious of how we design the shuttle system to be able to accommodate that. And so when we think about it here, and that this is just illustrative of how a shuttle system might work with some of the times that are similar to what we're talking about here. Let's assume that we're running a shuttle system and we're picking up K-12 kids on the bus all at the same time. And we have an 8 o'clock start time for elementary schools. It means that they would have to be, again, given our 10-minute window, they would have to be at their destination elementary school by 7:50 to be able to drop those students off. Then the elementary school would start at 8 o'clock, and that 10-minute time frame would be used to get the transfer buses to the points where they're needed for transfers. So wherever we decide the transfer point is, from that transfer point, as you can see in the morning, we would have 20 minutes of travel time. So we, again, assuming an 8 o'clock beginning for the transfer, we would have an 8:20 arrival. If we have sort of 10 minutes of loading and unloading, you know, whatever it might be, then we would have an 8:30 start time for the high school. Now, when we think about that in the afternoon, one of the things, and this is where the length of day becomes a challenge, we have high schools that would finish at approximately 2:50. This is just to make the math a little bit easier. It's 2:47 now, but just to make the math easier, we rounded up to 2:50. We would have the same loading process that we would have previously. So we've got sort of 10 minutes for the kids to get out of school and get on the bus, which means the middle school and high school transfer buses would depart their destination locations to go back to their points of origin at 3 o'clock, right? That's the 10-minute window. But at 3 o'clock, we would also be dismissing the elementary schools, right? So given the physics problem of being in 2 places at once, that's where the requirement for additional assets would come from, right? Because we couldn't be using the same buses to do the transfers as we are to deliver elementary school students. Because even if we wanted the elementary school routes to depart at 3:10, we're only halfway through the transfer travel time during that period, right? So the elementary school routes would depart at 3:10. The high school, middle school transfers would arrive in their destination towns at approximately 3:20. Kids would still have to move around a little bit because we would need to get them on the right routes to go home. So that would take approximately 10 minutes, and then they're on their way to their destinations, right? So one of the things that we know about the existing bell time structure and the shuttling piece is that to minimize the cost of using a shuttle structure, we would have to make some accommodations from a bell time standpoint. And we'll talk a little bit about what that accommodation would need to be here in a moment. When we're thinking about it, there are several critical decision criteria that we need to be thinking about. The first one is just where are we going to stage the shuttle? Because ultimately, right, we've got to get all of the kids who are going to the other district to that point. So from a routing perspective, right, that becomes our ultimate either destination in the morning or point of origin in the afternoon. We've got to establish, as I mentioned, school start times that allow for this sort of 20-minute travel time, 10-minute loading time. So by the way we're looking at it right now, if we were, and this is where it's important to keep the full length of day in mind. If we were to pull the high schools back 10 to 15 minutes, we could accommodate the shuttles without necessarily disrupting the morning elementary schools. So keep in mind what that would mean is if we go back to the previous slide, that would make this 240, which would allow them to get to the elementary schools to be part of the routing structure by 3:10, right? So that window of being pulled back 10 minutes gives us the opportunity to incorporate the transfer buses into the regular home to school routing system that would occur post shuttle, right? The delivery system home effectively. And we can do that without necessarily having a negative impact on the elementaries in the morning, right? Which is the critical thing that we have to think about, because you've got to think about it from both ends of the equation, given a 7-hour and a 6-hour, 45-minute length of day. So when we think about establishing that condition, what we would want to make sure is that we've got allowances to be able to integrate those systems in the afternoon, so that when we've got shuttle buses coming out of where its point of destination would be in the afternoon, that it can effectively get to an elementary school, pick up elementary school students, and then complete the trip home for those kids. And one of the options may well be that we're developing 2 sets of routes, one which might be really short elementary schools. So they're elementary school routes. So they're going out, servicing the kids in the immediate area, and then coming back to be part of a second trip out to service a mixed group of kids from K to 12, right? That's, again, as we're thinking about options here, it demonstrates some of the transition or innovation or opportunity that exists to be able to make this supportive of a regionalized system. And then the last piece, obviously, that we would want to be thinking about is we've got to build this in the context of all of the other things that are occurring within the district that require transportation support. So that may be intraday field trips, it's after school activities around sports and extracurricular. So those kinds of things, before you were to finalize whatever established routing structure you would want to use, those kind of things would have to be part of the consideration. They're not something that's in our model because we were focused exclusively on just the home to school element of it, but they're clearly something that obviously we recognize that need to be thought about. So when we think about from a viability perspective, it is our opinion that transportation is not necessarily a barrier to doing this in any way, but there are some continuing things that would need to be thought about. We would need to be thinking about ride times and bell times in order to accommodate this. It's likely that we would be bringing about some innovation in the way that we're providing service or in the services that are being offered. And so what does that mean? Illustratively, some of our customers who have students who have long ride times in the afternoon, one of the things that they've invested in is Wi-Fi on buses to be able to allow the kids to do homework and to do some of those things on the way. And those have been put on the longest routes. And in some places it's been effective. Actually, in some places it's been extremely effective. And so it's something that becomes an option. Again, assuming you can get a signal up in the mountains and various other things like that. So, I mean, there's a number of considerations that go into it, but I think what we would want to be considering is what's the full range of options to try to mitigate any negative impacts of long ride times, right? Which is really what we're trying to accomplish. And then again, thinking about who's actually eligible, who's actually going to be riding, once we have a better handle on those, the model for routing can actually get a little bit tighter, and we can start to better understand what actual impacts are going to be. And so in order to get there, we're going to have to do certain things around, more regularized student counts, more regularized checking in of which kids are riding and when, so that we can essentially tighten the parameters that we're using to do the planning. It is our opinion, my opinion in particular, that the dedicated system, certainly while possible, is not the best option available for you, given all the constraints, that the design and the implementation of some kind of a shuttle structure is a much more viable, and frankly, even with the complications that come with it, it is a less complicated option to implement than designing what is effectively a completely brand new structure for some kind of a dedicated system. And I think in particular, one of the things as we're thinking about things that require continued attention from an administrative perspective is just the management of those shuttle sites, because things will go wrong and accidents will happen and snow will happen, and some days they'll be there perfectly on time and some days they're going to be 10 or 15 minutes late. And if there's 320 kids in a location that have to be transferred, we have to have a mechanism to be able to manage them, right? So I think we just need to keep those things in mind as we're thinking about what the challenges are of operating and managing a shuttle site. And then I think the last part of this is, because this would be different to very different for a lot of people, we would want to be really conscious of how it gets communicated out, how it gets explained, and give people the opportunity to understand what are the things that we're trying to do to mitigate whatever might be from a negatives perspective, the challenge of ride times, or the challenge of how students are assigned to buses, in order to be able to ensure that the system is being designed to accommodate what those concerns are. So I think, with that, I'm happy to take whatever questions may exist, and to the degree that we can get them answered tonight, I'll do that. To the degree that we can't, we'll just make sure we make note of them, and then we'll get back to all of you with some kind of a detailed answer as we go forward.
Sarah, go ahead.
I noticed there wasn't really a shuttle system that looked at going from the elementary schools and then having a shuttle go to the middle school and a shuttle go to the high school from that point of view, instead of having to kind of switch twice for some of them. Why wasn't, I only say this just because I know, like, my own kids get off one bus and then they get on a different bus to go to the high school or middle school in the morning, and same in the afternoon. And so I just didn't see that explored here, and I was curious if you did.
No, we didn't. So I had, I worked exclusively with secondary students. So I actually didn't have elementary school students to do routing with. So I had secondary students only, which is why my focus was on getting the kids to those schools. I had route information on them, but didn't build routes for the elementary side of the house. So my focus was purely on the secondary piece.
So having only one shuttle spot in each, like, half, versus having more than one shuttle spot. Correct.
Yeah, and I think, I think the option that you're thinking about is certainly something that you could consider. Again, the challenge, as I would suggest happens with all transfers and shuttles, is the more of them that you have, the more opportunity you give for disruption in the network in any particular day, and that makes the shuttle system increasingly challenging to manage. So the idea, so 5 transfers occurring to make a shuttle system work is more challenging than trying to do drop-offs in a collection at one location. Because, sorry.
Was Tri-Valley Transit's buses considered since they run between Virgins and Bristol?
No, this was done, my analysis was done exclusively with the thinking around the use of school buses.
How dramatically does this plan change or not change if the, looking at the presentation, it seemed like the assumption was that Mount Abe was the high school and Virgins was the middle school. If that situation is switched, how dramatically does this plan change?
So interestingly, right, we've got 320 kids moving in each direction. So I think we would, I don't think it changes dramatically, but I would want to hedge that some to just be able to, you know, because I didn't look at it specifically. But with, you know, with the 320 kids, you know, I don't imagine it's dramatically different if we flipped it around, but we could get a feel for it just by having an understanding of basically doing the math in the other direction, right? I just don't have those numbers in front of me. But if it stays consistent in that sort of 300, 350 range, it doesn't change dramatically, at least in the population of kids that I'm working with right now.
That would shift some, right? So the numbers would shift. That's probably where the impact would be, because it's the same number of kids, but it's 3 grades from the Mount Abe district, exactly. That many kids, and it's 4 grades from the Virgins district. If you reverse that, then the Mount Abe numbers are going to go up and the Virgins numbers go down.
Go down, right? Exactly. Yep, exactly. And I just don't know the volatility of what that looks like.
Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Tim, that was really interesting. It kind of, you know, very well presented and gives us a good sense of what kind of ride times we're looking at. Hopefully this will change in our region, but the notion of having internet on buses, at least in Starksboro, is kind of fun.
It's a get. I understand it's a get. Yeah.
I also, you know, speaking about my own kids, I wonder whether internet access on a bus would just mean more TikTok and or more homework. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a controls issue, right? Yeah, we could work on controls if we could get a signal.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The question I had is on the shuttle scenario. You kind of estimated the ride times for the the regular routing, but what are the ride time sort of estimates for using the shuttle system? Because obviously kids have to arrive, the elementary school kids have to arrive at 7:50, but they have how much time before then?
Correct.
On the bus?
Yeah. So I think during the presentation, we mentioned that there were 15 routes of the original 39 that had ride times over 60 minutes. In looking at the shuttle structure, that was down to, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was 9. So there's still some, and I think as we mentioned, right, there's still some work to be done there, but it is notably fewer.
Kevin?
I'm just to follow up on Sarah's question. I'm not clear if all of the routes out to the hinterlands are picking up only, you assume they're picking up only high school students, or would they be picking up high school and elementary at that point? And if so, if they're picking up both, or you're running one bus instead of 2, going back to Sarah's question, I'm a little confused as to why the buses couldn't pick up from the elementary schools and go to the respective high school or middle school.
So in the shuttling option, they are picking up students across the full grade spectrum. The assumption is they're picking up kids across the full grade spectrum because you're running similar routes to what you're running right now, which is kids across the full grade spectrum. So under that scenario, they would be, under the first scenario, they would be operating just secondary, so 6 to 12 in those routes, which is, again, I think why we need so many more additional assets in that first scenario.
Thanks. Erica?
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really interesting and enlightening presentation. I don't know if this is relevant for our group, but I'm wondering if we have to recommend changing, the length of the day or start times and times, particularly I'm thinking of high school. Do we also have to coordinate with the other programs like the Hannaford Center and the Walden? Because those, I don't know. I assume that Mount Abe also participates in the Hannaford Center. I know they don't do Walden, but this is something like for me that's really especially valuable about Virgin's high school, is that we have these other programs and that they're very accessible to all the students who want to pursue them. And I would want to just make sure that we could safeguard that.
It is the bus system as it's currently designed that drives and has driven for a long time the fact that elementary school kids go to school much longer than the high school. It's just the geographic arrangement with the high school, middle school in the middle. We tried to undo that a long time ago. We've done it, had 2 studies, both defeated by the communities because a couple of things. Parents wanted the siblings to ride together so that the older one could take care of the younger one. And there were a couple of other reasons too that they didn't like it. But the upshot is, the buses came from the outside, dropped off kids at the elementary school, and then went into the center at Mount Abe 10 minutes, 15 minutes later. Undoing that has been on our table for a long time.
I just had one question. What's the current maximum bus ride, do you know, for each district?
The target rides, as I understand it, are 60-minute-ish, but there are a significant number of routes that are over that already. And
Current target, not current reality.
Yeah.
That's about what it is for us.
Okay.
And given driver shortages and so forth, I don't know what the impact of that has been on actual, ride times.
Anybody else, anything else? Thanks, Tim. Appreciate this work. Lots to think about.
Thank you. Yep. And as we've mentioned, we will continue to be available to respond to questions as you have them. So just, please, we'll do what we can to get those responses back. And for the couple of questions this evening around some of the counting and so forth, we'll take a look at those and see if we can get a response back as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye now.
So people want to take a quick 5-minute break? Or do you want to power through?
Let's power.
Power through, you're saying? Okay. Sure.
So I think, none of that was shocking. We live in a rural area, and when you buy a house in Vermont, you got to be prepared for the consequences, right? The further away you live from a town center, that's a decision to make. But I think it brings up another question, though, of like length of school day. Like Mount Abe already has a pretty darn short school day, and I don't know legally how much shorter you can go, right? Like because there's an amount of contact time you have to have every day with the kids. But I also think it brings up something when we're talking about, back to the discussion about why are we really here and why were we asked to be here? I think ultimately it was because how do we keep funding our schools? We keep them open, at all levels, but also how do we provide education that we really believe in and hold ourselves accountable to for our students coming through. And one of those things that makes me just worry is that, and it's not a breaker, but like if I'm a middle schooler and there's a middle school play and I live in Lincoln and the middle school play is in Virgin's, that's going to be a constraint for some kids. And it already exists. Kids already don't do some things because it's hard to get back to even their closer regional schools. But I think it's something we have to think about in terms of, we've had a big shift at our school about just even thinking about clubs and extracurriculars and student councils, and like, how do you provide equity and moving that into the school day? Because everything you put at the end of a school day now, after the buses leave, will be almost impossible for a lot of kids to be a part of. So we'd have to really be thinking about systemically, in terms of equity, how do we make sure that we're providing things to kids who have to rely on the transportation and don't have cars?
Right, then we have activity buses, but there are only one or two of them that poorly serve the kids that want to get home.
Yeah, and there's no magic answer to fix all of that, but we have to think about some of the logistics that will have ramifications to what we really want kids doing in their school days.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I started without any knowledge, when this committee started, thinking that transportation is going to be the juggernaut. And I became numb to that after hearing certain proposals in the Mount Abe community of sending kids wherever, which means they would be going a whole lot further than Mount Abe or maybe even Virginia's. But this has really brought me back to that concern, and much of it Troy very eloquently echoed, about how much of a inconvenience, disservice, advantage is how the transportation becomes not equitable. It becomes still a benefit for a merger as opposed to a burden.
Are you saying how can we make it a positive thing?
There's
no
gotta
other way.
crack that nut somehow, you know.
How can we solve other problems with this giant problem?
All right, if there are any other questions on this? Oh, there's one more. Oh,
I just want to follow up on Troy's point. I think that it's really important from an equity standpoint. And it's not just a question of whether a family has a car or not. Because, we all know there's a certain, percentage of the population that relies on the school buses. But it's also it affects folks who don't have the kind of, who have to work, frankly, and don't have the flexibility, say, of providing transportation, regardless of whether they have a car, but they just can't do it because they have to work. And so, again, that's another kind of aspect of the equity issue, which I think is important to consider.
Thanks, Brad. All right, we're going to move on to community engagement planning.
Okay, I have 4 topics to touch base with you on tonight. One is I want to give you a brief summary on community outreach. And 2, I want to check in on some basic logistics. 3, review the revised plan that was sent to you via PDF. And 4, show you the draft survey for follow-up for any feedback you have. Just wanted to, I want to pass around. Glory created these flyers with tear-offs with the shortened version of the link for registering for the event, and would love it if you would express your appreciation to Glory for her awesomeness, but to
Thanks, Glory.
take
Thank you.
yeah.
That seems like a lot of paper cutting.
Yeah.
It was, I just was watching a movie and did it all too.
But feel free to take some, share them with your friends, hang them in convenient locations. And that is the latest supplement to the community outreach. The opportunity has been posted on both district websites. It's up on Facebook. It's in Front Porch Forum. Thank you, designees, for your help with that. And I think it's also been posted in other community sites by our designees. I think Ferrisburg Community Site might have it, and perhaps there are others. The opportunity is communicated in the weekly school newsletters. It is going around by word of mouth, we hope, and we have had explicit outreach to liaisons to assist with recruiting students for participation. And lastly, we have an ad in the Addison Independent going. It was in last week. It was in last week? Last Thursday. So there's lots of outreach that's been happening. So far, that's led to 27 people registering, which is a good start. But if folks can continue to cheer for participation and promote, that would be great. Also, Sheila needs all of you to register so that she can assign you to a job in a group. We have heard from a couple people who prefer facilitation over note-taking, but everybody also said, I'll do whatever you need me to do, which is great. And we have just one person who needs school access, so we'll work with. Pat, are you the right person to coordinate with a school home base for people who need to come in?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, because yeah, we're hosting next time, so.
Yeah. Okay. Just
But
want
otherwise, we're online.
If you're comfortable being online at home, yes, you're online.
I'm excited about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Erica has a question.
Actually, just in regard to Front Porch Forum, I tried to set up an account for myself as a government person, and it still didn't allow me to access any towns except for the ones that I could access permanently. So I got in touch with them and they said, in order to do that, you have to buy a membership or that level of service or whatever. And the school districts have bought that. So somebody on the school board could use the school district's account to post to all 10 towns, but I can't do that. So on the other hand, anybody can post. So if someone who has access, I can, they split up the town, the neighborhoods very strangely. So I'm not even sure which neighborhoods I can cover, but if someone else is on Front Porch Forum and can take the lead, I can only do, Virgins, Ferrisburg. I think it's, I can't remember the other towns, but I can look into it and let people know.
I'm part of that group in that Bristol.
So I've done a fair amount of work on this because as a legislator, I could post to the 4 communities that I represented, and it was easy and often. So I just presumed as a school board member, I could communicate with all the schools, with all the towns that were in the district. That's not the case. They do not permit that of school board members. I tried to argue that they should. That fell on deaf ears. Their policy is, as Erica explained, is the district, our district, Mount Abe district, has purchased access for the 5 towns in the district, and multiple people can use that. I presume it is an incrementally additional cost. Right now, it's only under the superintendent's name. I have urged our school board chair to, because I think one of the communication problems in our district is it seems like to many people that I talk to, it seems like the superintendent speaks for the board when that's not the case. It's just his name appears on Front Porch Forum. And so I think changes can and should be made where at least the chair of the school board can communicate with all 5 towns, if not every school board member. But that's up to the chair of the board and the superintendent how that purchased access is handled.
I'll follow up with the superintendents and we'll come up with a Front Porch Forum hosting solution.
I'm sorry to point this out, I actually feel terrible. But I'm just wondering if we could have a sticker printed that we could put on this with the date and the time.
Well, it's just handwrite them in for now.
When is the date?
You do, but
Write it down.
16th. Or we could put it on the corner.
Merger study committee, maybe right under there,
Just marker.
November 15th.
16.
November
30 to
16th.
8.
Sorry.
November 16th?
I missed it too.
No, it was. On the thing that was included in the, like the newsletters.
Time?
and the-
6:30 to 8.
It changed around a few times because. Oh. Yeah. All the other
Thanks for
ones
picking that up.
I'll just write it on
Yeah.
each one.
Right.
It's not too difficult.
Thank you. So we'll work on the front porch forum thing. It'll go on my to-do list, which is buried here. Just want to be clear that this is not an official meeting where there will be discussion, decision-making, minutes taken, and I don't believe it will be possible for the entire event to be recorded if the breakout groups, yeah, so you can only record the intro. It is a listening event and a community engagement event, and we'll begin with just that brief sharing of information by the co-chairs. Patrick is going to coordinate the place for people who need to be on campus to have internet access and a quiet place to connect. And I think that covers the logistics.
And folks have to email me directly if they need that, is that how?
Sure.
I'm gonna do it? Okay.
And I have one that I'll connect you with. I do have, does anybody need a hard copy of the updated plan that was sent to you by PDF? I'll send some both directions. Let me turn to that page really quickly. So basically, the overall plan is very much the same with the changes that we discussed at the last meeting. We have a 20-minute welcome from the co-chairs, a circle protocol introduction by Erica, and 60 minutes in circles. So that's it, hour and a half, that's plenty for people on a Thursday evening. And the last 5 minutes of that is a closing in circles, if at all possible. If you are not able to conduct your closing in circle, you will be called back to a central location, and Martha will do the closing for folks that weren't able to complete that in the session. So that's the new addition. I did update the circle questions per your discussion, and would welcome any feedback about those.
Can you clarify what you just said about Martha, if they don't finish? You said something about if they don't finish.
What committee member, what folks asked for last time is that lovely countdown.
Okay.
That brings people back to the large group. So people who weren't able to wrap will be called back to the large group and
At 7:55 or 8?
8 o'clock.
Okay, all right.
And so that's kind of that's ending plan 2.
Gotcha. So for anyone remaining on the call at 8 o'clock, the breakout
Yes.
rooms will end. Okay, got
Yes.
it.
So the questions are on page 5. People want to take a look at those and see.
So the warm-up is within your small group.
Yep, all those questions are in your small group.
What's your anticipated maximum group size? I'm gonna go there. Not anticipated. What is your maximum group size?
I would say 8.
Oh, okay, that's great.
And you're keeping a list of who wants to be in your group. and you'll get that to me. So.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Because we'll need to strategize about recruiting.
And so there is a talking piece. I want to clarify that.
Because you're virtual, there is not. So facilitators should establish an order, and there's a suggested, when you're done, say pass.
Okay.
And they go around.
So as a facilitator, you would say the order we're going to go in, everybody should write this down. This is the sequence we're going to go.
Yeah. Or even, yeah, just remember who you follow.
Got it.
Can I ask or make a comment?
Yep, go ahead, Erica.
Thank you. First of all, I missed what you said was the maximum number of people in a group.
8.
Okay, thank you. I was coughing. And then I was wondering, maybe instead of something to pass around, maybe we could use the hand in Zoom as the talking object. I don't know. I just thought about that.
You could.
So when you're done talking, you put your hand down and that can signal you're passing your turn.
I think facilitators can use their judgment on that one, depending on their participants' level of comfort and skill. Sir?
Are they, sometimes I do better when I read the question. So is there a way to provide some of the questions, or should we type them into the chat, or, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you could certainly link to a document.
Okay.
And put the doc in the chat box.
At least with just, these are the
Yeah.
questions that are gonna be listening.
Yeah.
To your answers to. Okay.
So I'll get you a document.
When we are in the breakout rooms, will we have screen sharing ability?
Well, if you were screen sharing, you wouldn't necessarily see your participants as well, right? So they'd be in a panel along the side or the top, so you might not see all of them, but I think you can screen share in a breakout group. I guess, I don't know.
I have.
Yes, you
before.
can.
Yeah.
So, but you know what I mean? Like you'd be limiting the amount of space you have available for your audience.
Dustin?
Oh, hi. I was just thinking for, one thing that would be helpful, we've done this actually quite a bit as teachers with our advisories and stuff when we were learning remotely, but if the prompts and whatnot could be made into like a Google Slides kind of presentation that we could share our screen and put up, that would be kind of helpful, because I do think it is helpful to sort of have the prompt written right in front of you so you can be thinking about it as your turn's coming up and whatnot. And that was an idea. And also, I guess for, when you're doing it virtually, the talking piece, there's not really a physical object to pass around, but if people do put their screen into speaker view rather than gallery view, whoever is speaking it will pop, that person's face will pop up their screen if they are sharing their video. And I usually just start with, I just look on the participants list and I write down that order and I share with that what the, with the whole group, this is the order we're going to go in. And I just sort of keep that in front of me to make sure just to keep the order, because it can sometimes, if people pop in and out or whatever, that participant, the order might change as you go. So I try to write that down at the start. And it is sometimes, if you got a small screen, if I do it from my office in school, I have a second monitor that I plug in to do extended screen, so I can put the Zoom presentation over on one screen and then have like a separate screen where I can be looking at other documents that I might be using to guide the meeting. Is something I find helpful for myself.
Thanks, Dustin, it's helpful. Anything else on that? Okay, Teresa.
Burleson also has.
Yeah,
Communities,
we'll take his, the public comment.
So I am sharing a draft survey, and I just want to show you what it looks like. Oops, highlighting significantly. It just thanks people and is really clear that responses are anonymous and their feedback is helpful. The questions start with, how did you learn about this opportunity? You discussed wanting that question at a recent meeting. And I used the same list of communications that I highlighted for you. And then it asks if they attended the community meeting on the 16th, because this will go out afterwards. If the answer is yes, there's a set of questions that will come up first that ask about the community meeting. And if it's no, it'll go right to those circle questions. So the yes questions are on a Likert scale. Was the event positive? Did I get to meet people, new people virtually? Did I get to share my thoughts and feelings? Was the environment safe and respectful? And then it says, do you have more you'd like to share? If you're a participant and you don't, you say no, it'll take you to submit. If you say yes, we didn't get to all of the circles, or I didn't get to all of the questions, or I didn't get to say everything on a particular one, it takes you here, and this is an exact restatement of the circle prompts. So folks who couldn't participate are welcome to come in and add their thoughts, and those who did participate but have more to share and are welcome to come right in and do the same. And then,
How is this being sent to people?
you will send it by email, using the emails and registrations.
For the people that register for the event?
Yes, but it can also go out, just like we communicated this, with websites, tear-off sheets with a deadline. We'll have to set a deadline so that you can gather it. I'd like you to be able to start reviewing it and synthesizing it in December. So pretty tight turnaround, maybe of a week and a half for people to complete the survey. But we'll email people directly, and then we'll use all of the other communication pathways that we've used so far to say, please, we want to hear from you. Okay? Any questions, comments, feedback, things I missed in the survey?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Can this go out through Front Porch Forum?
Yes, it can.
Because it'll have a link in there.
Yes, it can. Yeah.
After.
After, definitely
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
You know, I hope that people come to the event fresh and open-minded and not rehearsed and just willing to share what's in their heart and listen to what is in other people's hearts. That's what it's about. So it's an after survey, and that's why I kept the scripts on paper rather than on the screen.
Just really quick, so these questions 3 through 9, are those in the order we want to go? Like, if we get bogged down, do we have the most important questions first? Like, if there's a scenario where we don't get to 8 and 9 potentially, right? So
right.
I'm just wondering.
I think 1, 2, and 3 are important to start with. And the rest you can choose an order that makes sense to you based on your judgment as a facilitator and the mood of the group. How's that? But it's good to warm it up.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%, yeah.
Erica, go ahead.
Oops, I can stop sharing.
Thanks. I noticed when I was reading through the materials about the circle that one of the sort of unchangeable rules is that the facilitator is also part of the circle, but I was wondering if that's true in this situation where we are acting as just listeners? That's the goal. Or should the facilitators also participate in the circle? And then, yeah, so that's my question.
My hope is that the note taker for sure is just listening, so that that person is really demonstrating that they're paying attention to the big ideas, not the exact words, but the big ideas that people share. And of course, not attributing them to any individuals, just getting thoughts and feelings. I've seen it happen both ways, Erica. And in this particular case, since I know that you've had an opportunity to do this yourselves, I think it's not as important that you participate, but it also, depending on your group, might be useful for you to model a response. So especially in the beginning, and introducing yourself and what brought you to the table, those are all really important things to contribute. So I might do a little bit of modeling, especially in the beginning, and then pass when it was my turn and let the other people whose voices haven't been heard yet really be the focus of the event.
So going back to Troy's question, what do we do? Prioritize, because there's a concern we might run out of time. Should we, or the note keeper, or somebody be keeping a clock to kind of move the questions along, or not?
That's part of the reason that we have the follow-up survey. So you can always say, we might not get through all of these. Okay. And I really want to encourage you to engage with the follow-up survey and share any thoughts that you didn't get to share. And in the times when I've approached it this way, people really take advantage of that opportunity. They appreciate being heard, and they appreciate the follow-up opportunity to share anything they didn't get to. So keep reassuring people there are multiple ways to get your thoughts out there. So
I'm assuming we're each in a different group, but we might end up with more groups if we're, lucky with people. And do we have additional facilitators, or then?
So we'll have to keep an eye on that. There are 39 people registered right now, including you guys. So there was 27 earlier, now there are 39. So, we'll just have to kind of keep an eye on it. And then the only other time I facilitated something like this, we had more people register than actually showed up. Right. So then in the last minute, we had to kind of collapse down a couple of groups. So
It's usually okay.
Yeah. Because we didn't want a group with 2 people. That's not robust.
Depends on the 2 people.
Well, that's true. Put myself in a room all by myself.
So you feel ready?
Maybe when we communicate out with you, I'll just include my cell phone just in case you're having any sort of technical issues. I might not be able to check email to see that you're having trouble getting in or something, but I would see a text. So maybe we'll just send that out too.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's our next thing, is that meeting. We're not together yet.
We are not together on the 16th in person. We are virtually.
All right, I have a quick thing that might prep us. Do people want to give 3 minutes? Because here's, I think, what happens. Like, we're starting to feel the weight a little bit. It's getting dark. We've had several meetings. It feels like maybe we're not going as fast as we thought we might go. What if we got ourselves in the frame of mind, if we did a quick gratitude circle? We said one super fast thing that you're grateful for in this process or being in this group. It's got to be quick.
The ability to examine past decisions and future options.
Like the problem-solving aspect with a group of people that are interested in problem-solving.
Meeting people and hearing ideas from the other districts.
Collaborating with everyone here and hearing all the different points of view.
Being able to learn from some of the experts about some of the data and issues.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with a group of people who are really committed to public education and what's best for students. I'm also grateful for Gloria.
Grateful of being a part of helping with the solution as well.
I'm really glad that we're looking for ways to do better for our kids.
I've enjoyed seeing that we have more in common than we do.
I've really enjoyed seeing how open everyone is to seeing what our options are and being open to wherever this goes.
I'm really grateful for getting to know the other side of the county, that you've got a lot of the same issues that we do.
I like the open demeanor, I guess you could say. I was thinking about non-adversarial. Across the pond right now, we've got a lot of issues that have people excited. And it's nice to come here and have a very open, collaborative, non-intimidating discussion.
I'm grateful that we're all very caring about our community and our kids.
I'm grateful for an opportunity to learn more about the inner workings of the educational system and how it has been established and where there's room to grow, and even more so to hear about the values and to learn so much about other people from our county.
Justin.
Oh, hi. Well, I'm grateful, for the learning for sure, just to explore all that's involved with all these possibilities, and for the opportunity to collaborate with, such a committed group of people who's really looking for ways to do what's best for our students. And even though these problems can be difficult to grapple with, we're doing that work. So grateful for all of you.
Brad.
Yeah, I've been sort of gratified to work with colleagues from Virgins and hear about what kind of challenges they face.
Erica.
I want to say that I'm very grateful for this very concrete evidence of all the people who really, really care in my community in the face of just some very difficult things going on in the world today, but to see close to home how many people, and I feel like for each one of us that's here, we each represent many other people who aren't here, but also care very deeply about our children and their future.
I'm grateful for all the different communities that I'm a part of, and this is a new community, but I think in general, every community that I'm a part of all has the same vision, which is to do the best we can with what we have and try and think of a better future. That's what we're doing now.
Thanks, Troy, great idea. Appreciate it. Anything else on community engagement, Tracy? No, I'm all set. Everybody else all set with that? Ready to go? Let's go ahead and do communication key points.
Saw some transportation models.
Sales.
We got a very graphic sense of the transportation challenges.
That's a huge job.
We talked more about exploring supervisory unions, why kind of started having a conversation about what the challenges were to that, but what could also be the benefits of exploring it further.
We finalized preparations for our community event, which will be our next meeting on the 16th. Meeting slot.
I think that covers everything. Public comment. Herb, go ahead. Herb Olson.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. So thanks for taking the comment. I was looking at the minutes of the last meeting, and I did make a couple of comments at the last meeting, but looking at the minutes, I'm just kind of concerned that I probably wasn't clear enough in terms of the comments I was making. So I thought I'd better try it again with maybe a little more clarity. I live in Starksboro. I'm a member of the Starksboro Save Our Schools committee. We think it is real important for our students that Robinson School remain open. And we're pretty sure that the town as a whole is adamantly opposed to closing the school. To that end, we would like to request, we do request that this merger study committee schedule sometime in their work plan for a decision about whether the current right to vote that a town has before its school is closed be preserved in any future articles of agreement. And so, just being clear that we're making that request. I don't know who could respond to the request. Frequently, you never hear from people back. But whether it's Tracy or the co-chairs or whatever, that's the request that we're making, that this be put on the agenda, that it put on the work plan, be put on the agenda at an appropriate time, and that's our request. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Herb. It is on the work plan. It's on the work plan. It's been on the work plan since it was on the work plan last meeting as well. So it'll come up.
It's tentatively scheduled for January.
This specific issue, or what? Because I looked at the latest work plan, didn't reflect that.
School closure is on for review and discussion on January 3rd.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Rob Backlund?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name's Rob Backlund. I live up in Lincoln. I am on the Mount Abe School Board. I represent Lincoln on that board, but tonight I obviously only speak for myself. I have not been really caught up with all the work that you guys have been doing. So first of all, thank you for being at the table, for tackling this dinosaur, I guess, of a question. And so a couple thoughts I have, and I apologize if I'm redundant or if I've missed some opportunity to actually know the answers to some of these. But I guess what my comment is in the sense of, I asked the merger study committee to ask themselves this, how is unification going in your individual districts? How is the Act 46 merger unification going? Are student outcomes improving? What do folks at the front line, the line of scrimmage, if you will, our teachers and classroom support staff think? What do our school leaders think? What do our communities think? Have there truly been taxpayer savings and increases in equity since Addison Northwest merged to unify, and same with Mount Abe? My viewpoint, being sort of new to all of this and a new board member, is, I wish I could say it was going really, really well, but I'm not sure. And my reasons for that are a few. The financial situation. I mean, this meeting is occurring tonight because unfortunately finances aren't necessarily going the directions we'd like them to go. We had our ends monitor report last week in our district, and unfortunately our student outcomes don't show significant trends in improvement. And even for our poor students, we still are struggling to see a closing of the gap between our poor students and those that come from means. And then I think there's just the experience and perception of this idea of unification. In my opinion, the opposite of division isn't unification, it's collaboration. And in collaborating, you find ways to save money. And that's the best way also, I think, to provide equity. And so, I think about this idea of unification since 2018 in Mount Abe, and where we're at now, one town has voted to leave in a 3-to-1 margin of vote. One town is on deck to possibly hold that same vote. And unfortunately, we're having some really challenging situations in our schools right now. And I'm not blaming that on unification by any means, but I wonder at some time. So I'm saying this because I am under the guise that unification, I don't think is the best solution for our two districts. Because when you unify, you end up putting so much power into one central office. You put so much power and weight onto one single school board. In my experience as a school board member, like I've been tasked with trying to serve all of our students, close to 1,300 students in the district. And I'll be honest, I leave most meetings, wonder if I've even served one student well. I really, really do. It's just an enormous beast to try to tackle, to really understand the nuts and bolts of 6 schools in our district, from pre-K all the way through our seniors in high school. So I just go back to my original questions, and I hope that this group really considers the idea of maybe something different than a fully unified merged district. I really encourage you to think about a supervisory union system, in the sense of, I have no problem with one central office. I think one high school is a great idea. Listening to shuttling around 6th graders across Addison County to get to a middle school, I think we could have 2 vibrant middle schools. And I say, to Herb's point, the power to towns to decide if they want a school or not. And if they don't want a school, great, let them close it and welcome those kids back into the schools. In those towns that want to have a school and have decided to vote to leave, reach out to them and say, hey, we'd love to have your 6th graders through 12th graders come to our middle and high school. So would you join us in a supervisory union? The ignorance and naivete of the first merger vote, it doesn't exist anymore, at least with the folks that I talked to. And so I know you're doing this work because you want a really good outcome. And I really, really, really hope you are not blind to the fact that people right now are really struggling to see the benefits of a unified school district on our side of the valley. Thank you very much for all your work.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody else? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
no,
You got one more? Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. Rob is really excited. I think Dave Sharp has hit it on the head when he says that it'd be very difficult to get an agreement passed that doesn't include the towns being able to vote on whether they want their schools closed or not. I just cannot imagine it happening in Lincoln. I doubt it would happen in Stocksboro. And so the supervisory union structure looks like it has a better chance of getting off the ground. There's a couple of times now I've heard that towns think that their school buildings are more important than their kids. And I want to put that to rest. I'm sorry, my name is Paul Forlenza. I'm from Lincoln. I'm on the select board. I'm not speaking for the select board. You could burn down the school building in Lincoln. Let me say it again. You could burn down the school building in Lincoln and we would still want our kids to be educated in our community. Every community has strengths and weaknesses. Every community is unique. It has nothing to do with the physical building. It has to do about educating our kids and our community. And one of the strengths of doing that is the relationships that are built.
not only between teacher and student, principal and student, parent and student, custodian and student. Teachers who stay in one place to teach are able to form much more lasting relationships than when you have teachers moving from one school to another during the school day. And the last thing is the transportation scenario is mind-boggling. I just can't imagine how that would work successfully. So thank you.
All right, that looks like that's it for public comment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Keith, second. Carol, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Paul.